Hey there, it's Reba from Team Reba, Remax Metro East Side, and I am starting to do a bunch of video series that are all taking our open house with Team Reba show and putting them into videos. And a lot of the blog content, other things that we're doing, we're really trying to get into the more relevant video aspects so that you guys can hear directly from us what we think about different topics around real estate. And so today I want to talk to you a little bit about buyer agency. And I had a really interesting discussion just yesterday. We're a premier Zillow agent on their website. And I was talking to our local rep that we work with here in the Seattle area. And it was interesting. We got into a conversation about buyer agency. And he was trying to give me tips, like when we were talking to people about what we should say as it relates to people who are showing an interest in a property who don't yet have an agent. And they think that they need to contact the listing agent about seeing the property. And it got us into a very interesting discussion because I was pointing out to him, one of the things about a lot of Zillow users is that in the Seattle market, there's a lot of folks who have been coming here from other countries. And what many people in the United States don't realize is that buyer agency is actually not a thing in almost every other country of the world. It was actually something that went into effect in the United States in the late 80s, early 90s, really part of kind of like consumer protection. And so offices like the CFPB, Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, like that kind of stuff. These are folks who really kind of manage and think about, how does the consumer get a good experience? How do they make sure that everyone is looking out for their interests, that is appropriate within the transaction? And it's also something that, at least within Washington State, we really have to talk about, because the law of agency, there's 4 different kinds of rules and laws that agents here have to abide by. And they are common law, tort law, good business practices, and agency law. And agency law is very specific about the fact that you have buyer agency, seller agency, and dual agency as options. So we're going to talk about buyer agency, why it's there, why you need it. And, we always like to say that it's kind of like if you were to get into a lawsuit, you don't use just one attorney. Each party who has their side that they want to defend gets their own attorney, because you have attorney-client privilege. And in buyer agency, we have a duty of confidentiality to our client. So if you're working with somebody who is acting as the listing agent and they want to represent you as a buyer on a transaction as well with that same seller, well, you already have an inherent conflict of interest. Whose duty of confidentiality and who are they going to put ahead of themselves? Because that's part of agency law, is that we have to put the client ahead of ourselves and any of our own, monetary interests, any other personal kind of thing. Like, it's required for us to have that mindset. It's not called fiduciary duty, by the way, here in Washington. It's because we have these other 4 different tenets that we have to follow. And even on top of that, if you're someone like me who's a realtor, now we have a code of ethics, and anyone who's a member of the local Northwest Multiple Listing Service, they also have a rule book about this thick of things that we have to abide by. And again, when it comes to buyer agency, consumer protection really was about letting the consumer have somebody working on their behalf. Because what most people don't realize is prior to that late 80s, early 90s change, every real estate agent represented only the seller, because the seller in most cases is the person paying for the fees for the agents, typically in the form of a commission of some sort. Now that can be flat fee, could be a percentage. There's all kinds of different ways that can be done, because that's a negotiable item. But that is negotiated up front through the listing agreement with the listing agent. It's not something that the buyer can negotiate, not something that the buyer agent can negotiate. It's just, as you're part of the local MLS here, you take whatever is offered. But from the perspective of, again, you have a duty of confidentiality, and if you have someone doing dual agency, you have the potential conflict of interest of, every party involved in one of these transactions has information that they deem private, whether it's what the cap of their qualifying number is and what the maximum amount is that they would pay for the home. A seller might have what they'd be willing to take. That might be a lot less than what they have as an asking price. There might be some other circumstances behind that situation. Maybe there's a divorce or something going on. There's so many different things that we run into on a regular basis that it would be really, really difficult for one person to really be able to set aside a duty for somebody. And there's always a potential slip up that can happen too. So we're big proponents of buyer agency, making sure you have that in a written agreement. I know within our team, we do have a written buyer's agency agreement, and it spells out specifically to the letter of what the state requires from us of what our duties are, how we get compensated, what the duration is, what it is that we're looking for, because it's a transactional agency. It's not like you don't sign something and then forever that's you see people say, oh, I want to be your realtor for life. Well, that's a nice thing to say, but we don't really expect like that piece of paper to last in perpetuity. It's actually transactional. You do that one and you're done. So there's a lot of different things around agency, and we're always happy to answer your questions about it. So if you want to reach out to us, you can certainly do that at info@teamreba.com. Send us your questions. We'll be happy to answer them. If you want to know a little bit more about it, have us explain a little bit more about the whole process, or get you a pamphlet so that you can start reading all these details yourself, we're happy to do that. Again, info@teamreba.com. And we thank you so much for being an Open House with Team Reba viewer. Thanks.